So I need some help. I am part of a debate group where Christians debate atheists. I am of the latter category, and I've been struggling in one of the comment threads to one of those posts with someone who simply does not seem to understand. My question is, could I have resolved this differently? Can this be resolved differently, or is the person I'm trying to have a conversation with simply too dumb? The entire exchange starts with a post that I did not make that goes something like this.
Do animals have souls? If yes, do they go to heaven too? Or they'd go under judgment too? If yes, what is their moral basis to enter heaven? Any cat lovers here? Or any pets?
God made them with natural instincts to protect their young.
Prove it.
Yeah, right. That'll never happen.
What? You think it evolved? Lol. It is impossible. The Big Bang shows that the universe is causative. The fine-tuning of the universe and the intricate and exquisite patterns of life points towards God. Why don't you give your evidence to the contrary?
That's a nice deflection. You still have not proven it though.
This is what they do, mate. They're cornered, they know it, and can't provide the evidence for the assertion when challenged. I've seen it time and time again, over and over, until they block you.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps it was just an error and that he is going to present great evidence in a minute to back up his claim.
What evidence are you looking for?
You stated God made them with the natural instincts to protect their young, and I am looking for you to substantiate that claim. What evidence do you have to support the claim that you made? I have no idea what evidence you have, and I don't dictate terms, so give me your best one, please.
I mean, there are only two possible ways. Either they were created that way, or they learn that by evolution. Now, we know that if there were any evolution when the first animal came around, she wouldn't have any idea of taking care of her young, because the idea was not primarily in them. So obviously, the kittens would all die of starvation. Then how is that basic instinct learned? Sounds stupid, right? The only other option is God creating them with that instinct to be there inherently.
Even if that was the case, which is only an assumption on your part at this point, then disproving one does not prove the other. That's not how any of this works. That's what we call an argument from ignorance fallacy. I can't figure out how it could happen, so it must have been magic, God, leprechauns, whatever. That's not proof either. You're just trying to shoot down an alternative which does nothing to strengthen your own position even if you succeeded. So I will ask again, what evidence do you have for your position, not supposed evidence against another?
God did it because common sense would demand that evolution cannot bring the fact to the fore.
Are you struggling with a language barrier here? Because my previous post was all about how trying to tear any opposing side in favor of your own does not prove your side of the argument one bit. That is called an argument from ignorance fallacy, or argument for personal incredulity fallacy, if you are so inclined. Now, do you have any actual evidence for your position?
I don't think this is going somewhere.
Now, do you have any actual evidence for your position?
Yes. Intricate and exquisite design found in life can only be produced from an intelligent designer.
I'm sorry, but that isn't evidence for your position. That is just a failure of your imagination. Let me use an example. You have an apple. You put it on the top shelf in your kitchen. A day later, the apple is gone. After an extensive police investigation, you are convinced that it is either Jim or Tim that did it. Now to prove it. You are convinced Tim did it, but you have no evidence to that fact. So you go about establishing Jim's alibi, point out how he isn't tall enough to reach the top shelf, and claim that he does not even like apples. You make it perfectly clear that Jim did not do it. And because the only two alternatives are Jim or Tim, by proving Jim didn't do it, you eliminate him from the running and Tim has to be the guilty part, right? Of course, that doesn't work. You haven't proven Tim did it by proving Jim didn't do it. You are doing the same. You're claiming that Tim, God in this case, did it, but instead of actually proving it, all you are doing is saying how Jim, evolution in this case, could not have done it, and that all signs pointing towards Tim, God, without actually substantiating any of those claims. Just because you cannot understand how Jim could have done it, or even manage to regard the possibility that an other alternative exists, it is called an argument from personal incredulity. It is a failure of knowledge, imagination, or understanding. It happens. You can fix it by learning a bit more about evolution in this case.
Yes, it actually happens a lot. Believers oftentimes mix up falsifying atheism into proving the existence of God. It makes the argument chaotic sometimes.
Wrong, because the only other explanation is evolution, but then it is impossible because evolution goes against all the natural laws.
So you're basically pointing at Tim with no evidence at all and claiming it could only have been Jim and he didn't do it, and stomping your feet. That is clearly not how you convince anyone of anything. I'm not even going into how you are wrong about evolution, because clearly you are not here to actually discuss your stance on this. If you were, you would have actually read my post and understood that you need to evidence your claim. As it stands right now, it can be dismissed out of hand since you have not backed it in any way. That's a shame. I hope you realize how you failed in your argument, and maybe one day you will look into evolution a bit. You would stand to learn a lot about our world that way.
The only evidence is design that is very extrinsic and intricate, can only be done by an intelligent entity.
That's not evidence though. That's another claim. It's called the argument from design. It's another form of argument from ignorance. I can't imagine how something like this could happen on its own, so someone smart had to have done it intentionally. It is in the same category of errors as your previous argument. You're not getting closer to the truth here, merely stacking claims, none of which you've proven. Care to try again?
Poor Tim. I don't think even had a grasp how he failed his argument. Perhaps it would help a little if you can give details on how we are wrong.
We based our evidences on what we know from previous experiences and examples, and from there make deductions. Any design in life cannot come naturally. Intelligent energy must be invoked.
Yes, and we can see how designed things differ from natural things, and the natural world does not look designed. It looks like an iterative process of trials and errors under specific selection pressures. We call this process evolution. It happens on its own. No designer required. Evidence that. Right now, you're just making assertions without backing it up, which is not making your argument look good at all.
Biological world is designed. Find me a natural structure that is designed but has no intelligent designer.
That is not going anywhere. If you claim that all natural things are designed, then you cannot falsify it, which makes it useless. If everything in nature is designed, you have nothing to compare it to say that it is designed or not. It would all be the same thing, so your argument is highly invalid. I think that you need to get off that horse and try another, because it is not getting you anywhere. Did you happen to have any evidence for your claim? You're still going for the it has to because the alternative is inconceivable approach. It is getting a bit tiring. It sounds like you're stuck in a rut.
Biological structures are designed, and their blueprint for that design is found within the DNA. Plants cannot evolve.
You seem not to understand how evidence works. All you are doing is making claims. You've not provided any evidence to support those claims. And you are just making more and more claims. I ask you to evidence the claims, not to make more of them, because you're just shouldering more and more burden of proof for them. Don't you understand how arguments are structured?
I was giving you negative evidence. I told you evidences are based on experiences. Like design cannot come out from anything non-intelligence. That is a fact.
This is painfully disappointing.
I'm not asking for negative evidence, which is not a thing. Fine. Again, do you have any evidence for your position? I guess you could call it positive evidence.
Give me an example of any design that was not conceived by an intelligence, and I concede defeat to you.
Is that your way of saying you actually don't have any evidence for your position? And what you are asking has nothing to do with nature, not because design does not require a designer, but because you have not shown that nature is designed. You're just digging yourself deeper here.
It says ball is in your court. Give me an example of a design without intelligence, and I will concede that I have been wrong in all my arguments.
I asked you for evidence. You have been unable to. Are you conceding the point by trying to pull off your burden of proof to me then? I don't need to disprove your point. You need to prove it. I'm guessing you don't really understand how arguments work. Perhaps we are dealing with a language barrier or an education one. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure how many times I can repeat this point before you get it. You need to evidence your point. You haven't. Asking me to disprove it is not the same as proving your point.
Your evidence is to give just one example of a design that you can find that does not have an intelligence behind it, and I am done.
You clearly don't understand how evidence works. I'm sorry that you don't. I was looking forward to it.
That is my deal to you. You give me any design structure that you can find that does not have an intelligence behind it, and I will have to concede this debate and all debates that we have been having.
It is like talking to a wall. Even if I did, it would not prove your position. You have a burden of proof. You've not provided it. As far as I can see, you've already conceded the point.
Ditto.
4 days ago, you made a claim. I asked you to prove it. Scroll up if you don't believe me. You've been, since then, tap dancing and have been unable or unwilling to provide that evidence. You're trying to pull off your burden of proof in a childish, I ask you for evidence to disprove my point. It's just laughable at this point. And the icing of the cake is that you're not even trying to answer the point, but instead yelling ditto, as if that would do anything to strengthen your position. I understand that it may be frightening not to be able to account for the belief that you've stated. I get that. I understand how comforting it must be to try to get someone else to jump through a hoop when you can't answer the first questions asked about your position. I get that too. But you're being obnoxious and rude right now. I'm trying to hold a conversation to ask you why you think what you do, to prove your position. I didn't set out to disprove it. I don't need to. I was asking for you to tell me about how you learned this, what proof you have, what you said was true, and hoping, against first instinct, that you have been able to hold a cogent argument and actually produce something meaningful. Instead, you are tap dancing, moving from one point to another, and at no turn in these entire 4 days have you provided anything to actually strengthen your positions. Going back to my previous analogy about the stolen apple, do you see how you're trying to prove the innocence of someone rather than trying to prove the actual guilt of the other? Do you even understand the difference?